Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And as a reminder, and if you haven't already, if you wish to speak during public forum, there are yellow sheets by the door, and please get those up to Ms. Fritzler, and she'll give those to me before we get to that point. Are there any adjustments to the agenda?
Yes, we have in letter E, recommended actions for the consent agenda to accept the revised amounts for the Wyoming Department of Education Fresh Fruit and Vegetable Grant for the 21-22 school year, and the total amount to increase by $6,589.23. This grant was previously approved at the July board meeting, but due to the increase, we brought it back to be approved again for the consent agenda in the July meeting. Also included would be number 3 under new business, consider approval of revised contract amount with IMSE. Approve the revision to the IMSE contract for the 21-22 school year, an additional amount of $34,300. The original contract was approved in June, funded through Title 1A 6B. This is Orton Gillingham training. We had an additional trainer come in, and so that is the additional cost because of the interest and the need to advance learning through that program. Other item, letter J, consider approval of contracting with Solution Tree for district staff professional development. Recommendation, approved contracting with Solution Tree for problem-solving process professional development, including virtual coaching and 2 days of on-site training in the amount of $85,000, funded through 6B. And you'll notice other additional items or information was shared in the agenda or in the board packet regarding comparison to previous years. This is less than what our previous amount was on the expenditure for this training, as it is the second year, but is an ongoing training we want to continue. I will also point out a couple of items under new business for clarification. One piece that was part of the board packet in regards to the Smart Start plan. Under section 1A, there was a misprint or an item that was left in the Smart Start plan that should not be included in the draft. And that item is under safety and wellness. And it is based on the screening process. I'm just trying to find out which page. It is on 77, and it is the last bullet under safety and wellness. All staff and students are required to be involved in surveillance testing. This is not and should not be included in the draft. Also, for clarification in regards to the board packet, there is a sheet following the Smart Start plan that is listed on page 117. That is suggestions from the CDC and the Wyoming Department of Health. This is not part of the draft. If a trustee wishes to add any of those suggestions to any part of the Smart Start plan, they would make a motion to amend the plan to include which items they would like to include. And then that would be voted upon. And then that would then go into the next step as we pass through discussion on the first step of that item of approval for Smart Start. So there's just some clarification in regards to agenda order and what is included in the Smart Start plan versus what is a supplemental item that is not included in the Smart Start.
Already have an item I under new business, so can we make the suggested amendments, items J and K, so everybody's we're all on the same page. Okay. Can I have a motion to adopt the agenda as amended?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Smick. All those in favor of adopting the agenda as amended, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Are there any abstentions? The motion passes. Moved into public forum. As a reminder, there's a 5-minute time limit. Legal restrictions limit the amount of board comments and interaction during this portion of the meeting. And again, if you haven't already completed a form, please do so and give it to Ms. Fritzler. First on our list tonight is Mr. Rod Wagner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, student representatives, audience. My name is Rod Wagner, for the record, once again. I'm here to be a thorn in your side. I was here at last board meeting urging you to take your authority and responsibility seriously, to be proactive instead of reactive, and to remind you tonight of what you pledged when you took the oath to be on this board. You said that you would uphold the Constitution of the United States of America and the Constitution of the state of Wyoming. In case you have forgotten what that says, I'm going to read to you. We, the people of the state of Wyoming, grateful to God. Notice that word, God. We leave it out all the time. We need to be grateful to God for our civil, political, religious liberties, and desiring to secure them for ourselves and to perpetuate them for our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution. And then the Constitution of the United States of America, first of all, the Declaration of Independence. And we uphold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and that they are endowed by the Creator. Notice that word, Creator. With certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their powers from the consent of the government. We have a government that wants to tell us what to do. We are the people. We, the people, have the right. We, the people, hire the government. We, the people, hire the teachers. You, the Board of Education, have the authority to establish whether there's going to be school, whether there's going to be mask mandates, whether there's going to be a smart start. It's not those people who are elected. It's not our lady over there, Ms. Harris. You know our governor isn't going to institute a mask mandate because the election's coming up. So he's going to push it off on everybody else to do it for him, whether it's going to be at the county level or Ms. Harris at the state level. You need to take the authority, ladies and gentlemen. You need to take the bull by the horns. You might sit there and roll your eyes and say, not him again in the same old bull crap. Well, it's the same old stuff. You know, our founding fathers got together and they declared and pledged to each other their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor. I think that needs to be written into the oath that you guys take, that you pledge your lives, your sacred honor, and your riches, so that you can help these young students learn. Constitution says, we, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution of the United States of America. And I hope you guys will consider that tonight. Consider taking your duties and using your authority. You were elected by the people of this county to do a job, and that is to educate their children and do what's best for their kids. And so tonight I charge you with that and encourage you to do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Wagner. Next, Mr. Bob Peterson.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you. I have just two quick questions. I hopped on the website of the school district here, and there's absolutely no contact information at all for any member of the school board. There's no emails, there's no telephone numbers or anything. Nothing. I went to the courthouse, and the courthouse had exactly the same page that the school board has on theirs. And I find it disturbing that anyone that helped elect you would have a question for you, and they can't get a hold of it. I even called the school, but there was a delay because it said they had to get a hold of someone else to get us the number of the information. But I think that's terrible for elected officials to be afraid to have their contact numbers out there so we can ask questions. And then the number two question that I got on the school website to look at the curriculum for the schools. And when I did that, popped it up on the curriculum, I had to give my name and a password. I don't have any password for it. Is that a normal practice that you have to have a password to look at the curriculum that's being taught in the schools in Goshen County? I got on the state website and listed all of the subjects that were going to be covered. But I guess it's up to each individual school district, you know, to have the curriculum. But if I'm not mistaken, the curriculum is public information. And it should be on the website so that everyone can look and see what their children are learning. And then all of us elderly taxpayers that put the bill too can kind of see what's being taught, because I have a genuine concern with the education of our children. It's the most precious thing in the world. And I'm a great grandfather, so I go all the way down the line, how precious that is. I'm very fortunate. But I would definitely like to see some action taken sometime on putting that contact information. I mean, how are you going to get hold of the school board members and say, hey, listen to the school board meeting that's coming up? You shouldn't have to have a password to find out what's the school is about public information. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Mr. Drew Murphy.
Good evening. I'm speaking on behalf of Bernie Flanagan. She was unable to be here tonight. She prepared something, asked me to read it. As our family prepared to drive our child across the country for an opportunity to serve this country, we would like to thank the parents who publicly showed up to take the stand. As we approach the coming 21-22 school year, parents are now in a position to fight for their kids' rights as well as staff members to feel their jobs are threatened if they speak. The Smart Start plan has been a contentious plan from day one of its implementation. We lost many students to homeschooling, but were compensated by the government COVID funds. This time we do not have the availability of compensation. Parents can still pull our kids out if we see fit. If 10 kids move to homeschool, Goshen County stands to lose over $180,000. We know from historical data that it will happen. The mask is considered an human capacity. What would happen if you lose more funds? What does that mean? When the county stands to lose 30 students, many who would leave would make sure that their child education stipend would not go to benefit Goshen County School District. Several parents are looking at alternatives as we speak. How are you as a board, or even the superintendent, going to explain to families of staff that the budget has to be cut and that the position is no longer needed? We live in a small town. You will see their faces time after time. Are you personally prepared for that? Is there data to back up a Smart Start plan? And or will you provide that information and to approve a Smart Start plan? Can you back a plan that will revoke the rights of students and staff? Now that you've heard that part of my speech, let's move on to the investigation of the children. Rights were trampled on, they were questioned without parental involvement. The law is clear, your administration broke the law. How far are you willing to go to protect our children? Or are you standing firm in protecting those who choose to break the law? You do not take a stand by protecting the children. You tell the community that the children are not your priority. On my personal, for me, give us the choice to make decisions for our kids' lives, not mandate anything for them to do. Thanks.
Thank you. Miss Danielle Murphy.
Good evening. I first want to start off with expressing my sincere gratitude to the board for their vote to apply for a variance this last spring. I heard from so many parents, students, and staff members about how nice of a change it was. One parent of a high school student said it was the first time all year that their son got out of bed on his own and was actually excited to go to school. My daughter chose to do remote learning last year because of the mask mandate, and she was thrilled to be able to finish her last year of elementary school in person. One staff member told me that she noticed a positive change in the students at Torrington Middle School almost 2 weeks ago. I also want to thank Mr. Kramer for being so ready and willing to communicate with me and answering my endless questions. We may have different opinions, and I appreciate the professionalism and access to information. With all of that being said, I'm here to express my concern about the upcoming school year. Most importantly, the ability to choose what is best for ourselves, our children, and our families. I have 3 older students, 2 in high school and 1 in middle school. My youngest will be in kindergarten in a private school this year, and to be honest, what happened last year was the biggest factor in my decision. I will not send my 5-year-old to school where she will wear a mask all day. I will not send her into an environment where she won't see facial expressions, where she may not even recognize her own teacher when seen at the grocery store. I will seek an alternative education option for my older kids if there is a mask requirement. Last spring, some of you agreed that you are not in a position to make medical decisions for others. You chose to let the experts make those decisions. I am asking you to do the same now. Currently, there are no state health orders. Last week, the governor went on record stating that he wanted to. There are also no county health orders. I understand that many of you feel uneasy about this. You're in a position where you're bound to make somebody unhappy. As I stated like this spring, I am not anti-mask. I just want to have the ability to make that decision for myself and my kids. Yesterday, I contacted the Wyoming Department of Education and asked a very specific question. I asked, are school districts required to submit an opening plan for the school year? I spoke with Linda, who I was told was in charge of the Smart Start plan, and she very clearly stated to me that there are no requirements this year for submitting operational plans in terms of COVID regulations or requirements. She stated the only plan that is required is for the ESSER funding, and it's only a plan of how the money is to be used. If that's the case, do we even need a plan? Can't we leave it up to the parents to decide how they want to handle it? Several districts in the state are allowing masks to be optional. These include Niobrara County, Sweetwater County, number 2, and Arizona County. There are also several counties in Colorado that are allowing masks to be optional, and even the University of Wyoming is not requiring them this year. I think it's become very clear that our kids are not a part of the vulnerable population. My sons had successful wrestling and basketball seasons last year without any issues, and we just finished a 4-month-long baseball season. An entire team packed into a van for several hours without wearing masks and no one getting sick. I know you aren't able to answer my questions, but I have a few things I'd like you to think about. What data and metrics will you use in your decision to vote for the Smart Start plan? What data and metrics will you use when deciding if it's appropriate to move tiers? How many cases will it take to move from 1A to 1B, and so forth? Without a public health order requiring masks, what will the punishment be if a student refuses? What will the goal be? Is it to prevent all students and staff from contracting COVID? As we start the new school year, I'm asking you to leave the mask requirement off the table in all tiers of the Smart Start plan. I do believe by requiring masks, it opens the door to eventually requiring the students to get the vaccine. These are decisions that should be made by the individual or their parents.
Thank you. Mr. Josh Kruger, or Joshua, excuse me.
First off, I'd like to thank you for having me. Once again, my name is Josh Kruger. I'd like to talk to you about kind of a different topic, and that is the grading system that was implemented last year. And it's my understanding it's going to be used again this year. I believe that this new grading system has many issues. Most of us have heard it said that they're teaching to the test. Well, with the new grading system, I think that is exactly what is going on. When only common assessment tests count towards a grade and there is no consideration for assignments or homework, that's exactly what this new system is all about, teaching for the test. This last year, there were some that were told that they did not get 4s on the first try on a common assessment test. They were then told that if they did better on the second try, that they could get a higher score. I also know that right before the school ended, my children took some tests and reported getting 4s on those tests, but their final grade did not reflect that. Instead, they ended up with Bs. By the time the report card was given, the school year was over and the teachers were gone on summer break. This is wrong. Last year, when we went to a parent meeting at the high school, this is not how we were told the new grading system would work. You are setting the students up for failure when they are striving to do their best, but only receiving mediocre grades. We have a student who has a mild test anxiety. She stresses every time there is a test, but this new method of putting in only the grades for a test is extremely stressful for her. I know that she is not the only one. When students struggle with test anxiety, assignments and homework were a way that these students were able to demonstrate that they knew the material and had hopes that they could still do well, even when the tests that they knew they would struggle with. I don't understand why homework or assignments are no longer have any grading value, and only common assessment tests are the only thing given by the school that has any value for grading purpose. This is not how the grading system used to be, and this is not how most college classes grade. In most college classes, you have assignments, and you have tests. And now, granted, some tests have a much higher value than others, but that is okay. But the assignment still has some value. That's why the old system for Goshen County School, that's the way the old system for Goshen County School used to be, and the way that most college classes are graded. Are we truly comparing our duty to college with this new system? Since homework has no grading value, I've heard that some teachers were having issues with students not turning in their work. And if the work is not turned in, how are teachers supposed to know where the help is needed? Also, as a parent, I found it rather hard and almost impossible to find out how my children were doing throughout the year. It used to be that the Power School reporting was a good tool for parents, but when it shows a particular grade that is inaccurate, and now you are told that those grades are not accurate unless it was right after a test, and even then, like I said, it could be, you're not getting a 4 on it because it's not allowed, those reports could be wrong. How are we supposed to know where to correct? Another way some students are hurt by this new grading system are the students that are taking dual enrollment classes in both high school and college. Since most college classes are using a different grading system than what Goshen County School is using, these children may have ended up with a lower grade than some of their peers, even though some of them might be smarter, but because of the difference in grading systems, their GPA might not reflect that. It could end up showing the opposite of that. This new system, I think, will cause issues for how students are ranked in the school system, as you can keep taking the test several times until you get the highest score, and the highest score is what's allowed. Because of this issue, it might also cause some issues for these children to lose out on scholarship opportunities and possible class rankings. Why is it that homework in Goshen County no longer has any value? And what are we teaching our kids when they can keep taking the same test over and over to get the best results? Once again, this is not what they'll find in the real world and in college. School is supposed to prepare students for college, trade school, and rural. By using this new grading system, we are doing anything but. The point in high school, no matter where they go after, is supposed to prepare and teach students to be prepared for what's beyond. And we are not preparing them for life with this new system. Why did we implement this new grading system? Was it to improve Goshen County's overall scoring system? Numbers and maybe not consider what was in the best interest of our children. I may be alone here today speaking on this topic, But I'm not the only one that believes this new grading system has issues. Please take time to talk to parents and to teachers. Find out what they have to say about this new grading system. I would also encourage you to look at last year's numbers compared to the year before and see, is there a change in the district? And if so, does it truly show how the education system is working in Goshen County? Or are the results just because of the new grading system? Please take the responsibility to see what you can do to correct the grading system for the betterment of Goshen County school children. And on a side note, I do believe that individuals should have the option to choose how to their health, mask, vaccine, and I believe that that is an individual concern and should not be managed. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Moving on to information and proposals. We have presentations by the summer school and extended school year administrators. We'll start with Ms. Sims.
I need a brain break after all that. Fun. All right. So, Chairman, thank you for allowing me to come in and visit, talk about our summer school program. This year, when we did our summer school program, it was a really interesting year because it was tricky to try and get teachers and staff to work the program. So we had to be a little creative on how we did that. So each site might have looked a little bit different. I'm going to talk about that. I also looked at it as kind of an action research and looked at the best way to keep some data. So I'll be asking your opinion about that as far as what would be the best thinking of that. Okay, wait for my PowerPoint here. Right. While we're waiting on that, I'll just tell you a little bit about the process of how summer school starts. We get referrals from teachers. We look at trying to get students who fall between the 40th and 20th percentile or below, and in either math, reading, or both. And so teachers usually give us a recommendation of students who would benefit from summer school. And from that, we, you can go to that first slide there. From there, we contact parents and get them to agree to send their child to summer school. If you look on here, in Lingle, we had 29 students who were referred for summer school. 25 of them actually took advantage of that opportunity. In Torrington, looking at Lincoln and Trail, we had 100 students who were recommended and 59 attended. In Southeast, we had 20 who were recommended and 12 attended. This over here, this section over here, that is our attendance rate. Even though I sent out a letter at the beginning of the year for parents, please commit to this. It's 19 days in July, and that's not a lot of time that we're working on trying to fill some gaps or maintain what they had learned the year before. 81% attendance rate in Lingle, 83% in Lincoln and Trail, and 93% at Southeast was our attendance rate there. We had some students who showed up for the first 3 weeks, and then the last week was they were on vacation or had kind of intermittent time. Even with the note saying, please, 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 please have your child there. It's important that they're in the seat the whole time. All right, the next one down. And this is where I kind of played a little bit around with some of the data. In Torrington, over here we have our teachers that we had. And usually we have about 8 teachers that teach summer school in Torrington. This year I had, as you can see there, Mrs. Fields, Mrs. Bartels, Mrs. Schultz, Mrs. Brummel, and Mrs. Fulmer. And we, because of not being able to get more teachers to recruit and come and teach summer school, we had to break it up into 2 sessions because of the numbers that we had. So we had over here, we started at 8 to 10:30, and our 8 o'clock group started out with breakfast and then did their math and their reading. And then at 11 o'clock, we started our second session, and that group started out with lunch. So it's kind of nice in the sense that our morning group took a lunch with them, and then our afternoon group took a breakfast for the next day. So they were still getting that opportunity. So if we look at this, we had 19 days of instruction, and the students had 2.5 hours of tea time, give or take, because of the time that they were eating their meals. They had 47.5 hours of instruction. If you look up here, these are the results. So in May or April, depending on when their STAR tests were given, the students, on the average, averaging the first grade together for math, had a 49 percentile. At the end of summer school, they were at 48. So we maintained, we didn't make any growth, but we maintained in those 19 days. Second grade, we had 66% and 68% in math. Third grade, we did go up with 24% and 31, and fourth grade went up with 32 to 40%. Down below is the reading, kindergarten. And the reason why you don't see a score for kindergarten is because we use the STAR test as our evaluation system, and they don't have that at the kindergarten level. So a lot of what's given there is math facts, number of fluency, that kind of assessment. For reading, you can see that the kindergartners had gone up a little bit. First grade maintained. Second grade we dropped a little. Third grade kind of maintained, but with some height. And reading 23% up to 34%. I would like to add that with our Torrington program, we had 3 paras that the school district paid for, and then we partnered with the practice program, and they provided us with 2 helpers in the through the program. So that gave us a little more hands-on deck for some of our classes. Okay. This is lingo. Lingo, we had 3 teachers out there this year because we had 27 students. Teachers were Ms. Weber, Ms. Bushinger, and Mr. Arnish, and they had 1 para. So this group right here, they went from 8 to 11:30 of instruction time. 19 days, 3.5 hours. And so they had 66 hours of instruction that time. This group, our lingual group, was the group that had the most instructional time set up. Just because we had the personnel to do that with them. And you can see the scores. And what I did, I kind of played around with it to show how many students went up, how many students maintained at the different levels. So you can kind of see how they went up or maintained. So as far as like on the actual research, I'm just trying to see if, does time matter? Does what's going to make the biggest impact for our buck in the short time that we have? Okay. And last, this is another way of looking at our results. So out of Southeast, we had 2 teachers. We had Ms. Luxton and Ms. Correa. They went 19 days with 3 hours. The reason why they were a half hour shorter is because one of the teachers that I was able to recruit at the very last minute, said I can only do it until this time. So unfortunately, again, it was the teachers being able to, I don't want to say, having that time available to give part of their summer to do this. The one thing I wanted to mention and show here was Ms. Correa wanted to see what would happen if her students took the test. So these were given in May. And then she gave it at the beginning of summer school. She wanted to see if there was summer loss before the students had even started. So they had to get towards the end of May to the beginning of July. We started July 6th. And then she gave the test at the end of the summer school session to see if there was, in fact, gains in those areas. And you can see that there were some significant gains, as well as some loss between the end of school. So if we wouldn't have had our summer school program, all of those students that have maintained would have lost even more. So I'm an advocate for summer school, but I really want to see if we can figure out how to make it more beneficial for more students. Okay. So as I said, I had 3 different ways of showing you data. You guys have a preference of what you thought gave you the most information?
Well, I like that looking at this last slide, that we took a look at where we were at when we started summer school compared to the end of the school year. Because then I think that kind of gives you an impact of what summer school does for those kids a little better.
And I will tell you, we years ago, we used to do that where we would give the testing at the very beginning of the year or beginning of the summer school session. What happens is that when we're testing, that's your instructional time. But it is good to have that data, but then sometimes that takes away from your instructional time because you're testing a lot there too. So, but I do appreciate that we had that data just to see if there was a loss. I love the idea of showing the loss between that month that they were not in school. So with that back there. Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sims. For the middle and high school summer school, we have Mr. Strampy.
All right, my name is Chris Stransky. I am the physical education teacher at Lincoln Elementary. I know it says on the agenda that Mr. Flendel would be giving the presentation, so I'm sorry if I've disappointed any of you there. Am I correct? Did everyone have at least all the board members, you have a sheet to follow along? I'll try and go off of the sheet that Mr. Flendel prepared for the high school. I don't have a lot of the same specific data for student data. Since that, I'll try and provide a general outlook on that, as well as benefits of my personal observations.
Just Mr. For those that are looking for it, it's in the packet on page 5. Sorry.
If we're missing any, I have a few extras. Once again, I was the administrative intern for the summer school process. I'm going through my educational leadership program. So that was a great way for me to kind of see how things work in that limited environment. Get some hours with my internship. I'll start with the middle school summer school program. The teachers there you can see were Teresa Fox for math, as well as Sidney Cooper, and for language arts with Nancy Schultz. That was her first year doing this, so she took on a lot of stuff for that. Paraprofessional at the middle school level was Shannon Rogers, and the secretary and nurse for both the middle school and high school level was Chris White. Just some general people to thank for everything. The custodial staff there, all the summer school for middle school and high school took place at the high school. Both custodians there. Obviously, they have their own duties that they usually attend to over the summer, things that they need to catch up on. So for them to have to get rooms ready, clean the common one area that I think that was extra thing for them that they were able to do very well. So we wanted to thank them. A couple main points from middle school. This was a lot that behaviorally the students did it the best that he had seen within in the 5 years that we've been doing it. There are a couple that we'll get to for why he thought that was. I wanted to thank all the parents, students, teachers, staff, IT, custodial staff. Even though it's a small portion of the year and a very small size, there's still a lot of people. In terms of numbers, there were 44 students at the middle school level, primarily from Torrington, but there were a few from Southeast as well. 10 students had perfect attendance, like Mrs. Sims kind of touched on. We had several who were hit and miss throughout the program or missed the last portion of it, and that'll kind of show up at the end of it. But Mrs. Beckman did a wonderful job contacting families and students, trying to get them in. Obviously, we realize it's summer and people are doing things with their families, but she was on the phone constantly trying to get students in. So this took place in June before the elementary program. These students went Monday through Thursday, up to Friday off. That's something that they kind of found worked better for students to stay with the program, working for families, so have those kids. And so, at the middle school level, this year they did something a little different. They made every student take 1 hour of math and 1 hour of playing darts, whereas previously you had to choose which one. So every day they were getting that 1 hour of switching. That seemed to work out well and kind of take some of the fatigue out of it, so the students didn't feel like they were being successful on that, just focus on constantly. Mrs. Schultz with the reading curriculum. She kind of worked with the general ed teachers at the middle school to develop the curriculum since this is their first year. With the things that they could do and work out well for her. In math, the teachers were using a lot of the IXL program, kind of pre-teaching for things that the students might be seeing in the fall when they get to that spring level. Kind of preparing them with some knowledge so that they can be successful. There's a portion there. The middle school is still using STAR for the data portion of it. So basically, like we saw with Mrs. Sims' presentation, we were giving them that assessment at the beginning, and then once again at the end, looking at the growth. So some of the numbers might not add up. A lot of that is due to the attendance issues, like I said. Some of those students might have missed the final portion of it, where they took that cumulative STAR test at the end. So their numbers weren't good. Just generally in math, it says 34 students showed growth. It kind of lists the growth levels on the IXL. How that works is on the computer program, each level is a different set of information or a different thing that they're, if they get past that level, it's shown. In reading, it says 20 students showed growth and 10 showed a minor loss or maintained or were close to maintaining a STAR test. In math, it says 34, and in reading, that's 30 total. So I think they end up taking some tests on different things. So that would account for the attendance. But given that it's a new thing with reading, you see that it went well, and I think Mrs. Schultz probably had some ideas for next year. Mr. Plummer kind of touched on the STAR testing. I think that was probably the students' least favorite part of it. I understand the importance of it for showing growth through, but it was hard for them to get motivated to do it. So that would be something in the future that I think compared to last year, there were a larger number of students who attended the thing. And one thing that was really nice was some of the last year's fifth graders, this year's incoming sixth grade middle schoolers were able to attend. That kind of helps a lot of those students who have, maybe some concerns or fears about moving up to that level, kind of transition a little bit. So Mr. Goshen here, and Don shared really nice job identifying students. Just kind of personally, and as someone who's coming into this newly, I thought it was really interesting to see, I think we all have those kind of stereotypical views of summer school as, this is kind of a punishment for kids where you didn't do what you were supposed to and have to spend summer playing. And I mean, that was not the case. Kids were enjoying themselves, teachers were positive experience for everybody that was there. So thanks again. At the middle school level, all the school staff and everyone else, it seems like I said, it wouldn't have gone off very well without everyone. At the high school level, I'll briefly get into that. The big difference I saw between those two, at the middle school level, the kids are working on building those areas where they might push. At the high school level, they're going through that credit recovery process where, for whatever reason, maybe they had sickness, had days that they missed, or just weren't able to get through the material they needed in the school year. They were trying to make up that process during summer school and basically stay on track. So it's a little bit different than that middle school. The teachers for the high school summer school program, Kim Snyder was an English teacher, Kevin Murphy taught history, Lindsay Maxey was a math teacher, Roger Spears. Thanks. Christy Whiteman, a few more paraprofessionals, Melissa Lowey, Lisa Owens, Sherry Schultz, and Michelle Technical, who also there. Similar numbers here, there were 40 students that attended the high school program. Like I said, they were trying to attempt to recover some credits from the school year. You can see there were, out of the 40 students, they recovered 49 semesters of credits, and then an additional 13 true students who were taking that advanced classes, those online courses. The breakdown there, kind of science, math, English. The thing that I kind of took away from this is, if you look at the science, and when I walked into Mr. Spears' classroom, he's teaching different semesters of biology, physical science, chemistry, all those different courses, maybe to 6 kids that are in there. So I was just really impressed from the teacher standpoint that Mr. Spears could have, everything drawn out on the board. He's working with 6 different kids who are at different levels and even different classes. And he's got labs that he usually would set up for 30 kids that he's setting up for 1 kid in summer school. So I thought that was very impressive. All the teachers were, very helpful and able to provide that individual assistance with a lot of these kids. That very well might be the reason that they could earn that credit in the regular, because maybe they don't work as well in that large classroom setting. And then in this setting, they were able to really get it. Attendance wise, out of the 40, 3 did not complete the summer school attendance issues. So that wasn't for any lack of trying. Like I said, Mr. Wagner was constantly on the phone. But at the high school level, it kind of was more individual. The students had to figure out what they needed to do and get done on their own time. They were guided through it, but they had their own personal job they needed to do, and most of them took care of it. Mr. Wendell kind of called it a relaxed intensity where things were a little slower paced over the summer, but the students still needed to work hard to get their job done and take care of their own business. For the most part, I thought they did a great job of that. Similar to middle school, it's a very positive experience. Coming into it from an administrative side, I thought I'd be dealing with a lot of, disciplinary action and things like that. And we honestly had, other than a couple of small conversations about, talking too much, not doing what you need to. There was nothing that we dealt with. So I think for me, that was the biggest takeaway is, not having those stereotypes about what happens in summer school. Appreciating that it is a valuable thing that students and teachers got a lot out of it. I think the goal there was for the high school, the typical goal is to have 100% graduation. Obviously, they're not at that yet, but I think it's an admirable goal to have. And I think this program, does a lot to work towards that. If these students didn't have that credit recovery, then basically they would be starting the next year taking those classes instead of continuing on their graduation track. One thing Mrs. Ogden and Mrs. Snozzy, they were there most days, and when a student did recover one of those credits, then they immediately went and had a meeting with the counselor about where they were on for their graduation track and what their next step would be and how they would be moving forward. So just that extra help and extra contact with those kids who probably are not seeking out that contact with those students. I thought it was a great experience for me. It was an eye-opening and beneficial. Glad to be able to come and present it. Does anybody have any questions about anything? Answer the best I can.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank you all for actually spending your summers and doing this for our kids. So first of all, I'd like to express my appreciation of you guys doing that. But a question for you, when you have in here that 13 additional semester credits were earned through addendum, okay? So you're saying that students that were attending summer school, they did their work for summer school, but then on top of that, they did the work for addendum to be able to earn those 13 additional credits?
I believe the Edmonton students were students who were only participating in the school year. I don't think some of them did come in and work on their Edmonton in the physical location of the high school, but I don't think it was students who were in the school year in person and then additionally doing it. I think it's 13 additional students who were completing those activities.
Okay.
From the best of my knowledge.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Stramping. The extended school year, Ms. Nickel.
I'm joining you via Zoom, so hopefully you're hearing me okay. All right, so I have a document that I'll share with you. Give me 1 second. Is that coming in large enough so you can see it?
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you. So extended school year is a little bit different than summer school. So the extended school year services are for students who are identified as having special education needs. They have an individual education plan, or otherwise known as an IEP. And these are students that, as with the case managers have collected data throughout the year, they're looking at how long it takes the student to gain skills. They also take a look at where were they before break, such as summer break, from last May to this fall, or even something as short as our winter break. And then they look at where are they performing when they return from those breaks, and if they've lost some skills, how long does it take them to regain those skills? There's no magical formula for that, so it's always interesting. We kind of compare it to a typical student. Usually the first several weeks of school, teachers are getting students reacclimated to learning, reminding them of things that they learned the previous year. So it's kind of the same thing for a student with an IEP. But if it takes a student with an IEP quite a bit longer than their peers, then we start looking at what we call extended school year services, or ESY. It's kind of a weird thing under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. ESY is really intended, for the most part, to maintain. They're not supposed to necessarily improve. The goal is not to improve the skills, but to maintain them, which seems kind of contradictory to education. So usually kids are growing past where we're trying to maintain them. So kind of explained the rest of that. There's also another piece, we look at what are called predictive factors. So if we may not have data from the school year, say a student moves in the fall, we're getting to know them through the school year, but we can predict on how they perform during the school year that if they have a 2.5-month break from school, they're probably going to lose skills and it's going to take them a long time to regain those skills. So a student can qualify for these services based on that as well. Any questions on qualification? All right. So this year we had 2 sessions. We ran one in June and one in July. My preference is to try to do all of it in July because it gives the students a boost and gets them ready for the upcoming school year. But I had faced the same challenges as the summer school programs in finding enough staff to cover the number of students we had. So we split the students. We ran middle school and high school students in June, along with their peers who were in summer school. And then we ran elementary students in the month of July, which is when Ms. Sims was running the district summer school program. You can see the numbers there. Had 15 middle school and high school students and 22 elementary students who participated in the program for a total of 37 students. This is last year. I missed this one. So this data is actually from 2 years ago, from the summer of 2019. Last summer, we did run extended school year, and we also did what we called COVID recovery services. So the data was a bit different because, as we all remember, probably all too well, it was a very interesting year last year. So I'm comparing our numbers to 2 years ago for the summer of 2019. So we had a total of 37 students who participated this year, and 2 years ago we had 31. You can see we also provide what we call related services: occupational therapy, physical therapy, and speech therapy. Those numbers are there for you. And then we had 46 students who actually qualified for ESY this summer, and we had 38 back in 2019. And so if you remember, we had 37 participate. So not too bad, same reasons. You know, if students are going on vacation, some families just aren't interested in those services in the summer. They want to give their children a break. But we had 25 elementary students, 11 middle school students, and 10 high school students. And I had a few staff who worked the whole summer, so I'm hoping I didn't burn them out, but I really did appreciate them stepping in and helping me out this summer because we couldn't do that program. I told Mr. Kramer, I said I might be teaching this summer. So I do get out there and help. I did sub a little bit, but yeah, so that's a program under special education law that we're required to provide students if they demonstrate a need. Any questions for me?
Doesn't look like it. Thank you, Ms. Nichols.
Thank you so much. Have a good evening.
Two. Next is on the agenda is reports by student representatives, but we did not give them a topic for this month. We will, since school's starting back up, we will put our heads together and get something for you guys for the next meeting. But thank you for being here tonight. We will move on then to the consent agenda. Are there any items that a trustee wishes to pull from the consent agenda? Hearing none, can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Saucedo. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Sussex. Any discussion? All those in favor of approving the consent agenda as presented, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Are there any abstentions? Motion passes.
right, item 2, old business, item A, consider approval of proposed revisions to district policy 4122, part-time and substitute professional certified staff employment as presented on second final reading. The recommendation is to approve the revisions to district policy 4122 as presented on second final reading.
Can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Patrick. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Schmick. Any discussion? All those in favor of approval of the revisions to district policy 4122 as presented on second and final reading, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes.
Item B, old business, it's recommended to approve the revisions to district policy 4150.51, certified and professional staff maternity paternity leave as presented on second and final reading.
Can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Schmick. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Bullington. Any discussion? All those in favor of approval of the revisions to district policy 4150.51 as presented on second and final reading, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Are there any abstentions? The motion passes.
It's recommended to approve the revisions to district policy 4240.5 as classified staff maternity paternity leaves as presented on second and final reading.
Can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Bullington. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Patrick. Any discussion? All those in favor of approval to the revisions to district policy 4240.5 as presented on second and final reading, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Are there any abstentions? The motion passes.
Item D, old business, it's recommended to approve revisions to district policy 4140 as presented on second and final reading.
Can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Hager. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Schmick. Any discussion? All those in favor of approval of the revisions to district policy 4140 as presented on second and final reading, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? The motion passes.
Item E, old business. It's recommended to approve the revisions to district policy 4150, certified and professional leaves and absences as presented on second and final reading.
Can I have a motion, please? So moved. Thank you, Mr. Sussex. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Hager. Any discussion? All those in favor of approval of the revisions to district policy 4150 as presented on second and final reading, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes.
Item F, old business, consider approval of the revisions to district policy 4240 as presented on second and final reading. The recommendation is to approve the revisions to district policy 4240.
Can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Bullington. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Schmick. Any discussion? All those in favor of the approval of the revisions to district policy 4240 as presented on second and final reading, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? The motion passes.
Item G, it's recommended to approve revisions to district policy 4230 as presented on second and final reading.
Can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Schmick. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Salcedo. Any discussion? All those in favor of approval of the revisions to District Policy 4230 as presented on second and final reading, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes.
Item H under old business. Item H under old business, it's recommended to approve revisions to District Policy 4330, medical leave bank as presented on second and final reading.
Can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Bullington. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Cushman. Any discussion? All those in favor of approval of the proposed revisions to District Policy 4330 as presented on second and final reading, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes.
Item 3, new business. Item A, consider approval of the 2021-2022 Smart Start Plan. The recommendation is to approve as presented.
Can I get a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Bullington. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Any discussion?
Chairman Jesperson, I'd like to, trustee Miller had asked earlier in the week if representatives from Goshen County Public Health could come and give us an update on the quarantine information related to COVID-19. Kelly Beard and Heather Saul from Goshen County Public Health are here to provide that update regarding quarantine information. If they could come up and provide that, that'd be great. Thank you.
All right, you guys. And I haven't seen the updated, but the new guidance by CDC recommendation is that those who are, I guess I'll start off with.
As far as quarantine, if someone is exposed to COVID, is that what we're talking about? Okay. So if a student is exposed to COVID, they need to quarantine for 14 days is the golden standard. They can do a 10-day quarantine. They can be tested in 5 to 7 days, and if that test is negative, they can go back on day 8. Those are the recommendations. If the person is vaccinated and they are exposed to someone with COVID, then they do not have to quarantine, but they need, it's ideal if they would test in 3 to 5 days. And if they have symptoms, then they would need to test and quarantine. It's also recommended that they wear a mask for 14 days.
So whether vaccinated or unvaccinated, guidelines are that the individual will have to isolate and or quarantine, test 3 to 5 days later, so that's the quarantine.
If they test positive.
Right, well, no, so if
Okay.
for quarantine purposes, if the individual say I am vaccinated and I've been exposed, I will have to quarantine, test that 3rd or 5 days, and then I can go back on day 8 if I have no symptoms.
Okay, because that's different than what the guidance
But I
says.
mean,
Right, yeah, no, if I was fully vaccinated and exposed, as long as I didn't have symptoms, I would not have to quarantine. But it is recommended to test within 3 to 5 days after, the exposure, and then obviously that's symptoms of quarantine, but it is recommended to wear a mask for 14 days. It is still a possibility to spread COVID if you have gotten COVID, even if you're vaccinated. It's not very likely, but it is possible. Very effective, and that's the recommendation.
So in our Smart Start plan, Mr. Kramer, correct me if I'm wrong, really the only time we mention quarantine is really in dealing or recommendations from public health.
That's correct, yes. On page 3 of 43 and finishing on page 4 of 43, Listed are the current Wyoming Department of Health requirements regarding quarantine.
So, and just to be clear too, that quarantine recommendations are not a function of the school district or, you know, it's more off the recommendations from public health.
And I believe you, yes, from Wyoming Department of Health, yes, that is not correct.
So,
I apologize, our recommendation will go off the state health officer and.
sure, so just, so that's not a school decision though, that's coming from your office. Okay.
The reason why I asked for you to come is really just the experience of our fourth grade, sorry, I'm trying to figure out which grade my daughter is going into right now. The fourth grade class last year, once the mask requirement variance was approved, we quarantined essentially a whole class for the last week and a half of school, or week of school. I can't remember the exact time frame. And so I'm just curious as to, especially in those elementary school classes, in a situation where you have one positive case in there, what if the recommendation will be again to essentially quarantine the entire class for that period of time that you just described?
And that will be recommended if your child's 12 or under, they haven't now had a vaccine and they've been exposed, they will have to quarantine and or isolate depending on that individual test positive or not.
And kind of the closeness of the exposure.
6 feet.
But that was gonna be my question, because one of the guidance we got was talking about 3 feet. And then, but for quarantine, you're looking at if they're within 6 feet.
Right, and that depends on our community transmission. So if our transmission was light, we can go into that 3 feet with if they wore the mask. If they're not wearing the mask, we have to adhere to that 6 feet.
But if both people or everyone in the room, like if positive is wearing a mask and all of their classmates are wearing masks, then they do not need to quarantine. So if both are wearing masks, they do not need to quarantine. Research from Dr. Harris that actually CDC is kind of adopting what we did in Wyoming as far as the masking. I mean, we were one of the few states to be able to actually have a full school year and have kids attend classes.
Which I think having a plan helped in that success of the year. My question is, can you clarify for us right now where we're at as a county? And
And our transmission rate?
yeah,
Yeah, so right now we're at 1,217 cases or 24 cases. We did go up in probables. Our transmission, we are in orange, which is moderate to high, and that we go off of per capita. So that's where we are right now. And I think the other thing too that we have to look at in that plan is what about your employees and your staff who have not been vaccinated? And if you think where those users for our students, where's the backup plan there? I guess I'm curious about that.
I just shared, recently, I did have the current transmission indicators up there,
And
so.
that actually will update on Wednesday, so tomorrow. We have seen a uptick in cases. I think we had 24 and 10 days, compared to maybe the 4 or 5 we've seen. The Delta variant is almost, well, at least twice as contagious as the other variants, and right now that is the dominant one in Wyoming also. We have verification of this, they try to sequence most of the specimens that are sent to the state lab, but it's not always, just depending on the sample and everything, but I think we have 12, maybe 15 so far that have been sequenced, and those are not It takes a little while, so that like isn't the ones that we got today. Probably. Yeah, in fact, some may have been several weeks. So we're definitely seeing it here. It's a little bit scary for us, at least, that are in there, seeing the numbers and seeing what it can do. You know, you're familiar probably with that. You're seeing it.
So I think my biggest question, honestly, and the point was raised by Ms. Murphy very clearly, was while I think that to Trustee Saucedo's point that a plan is something that helped keep us in class. I think the question for me is I am unclear at which point the tiers are triggered, and maybe I'm missing it. But I do believe, to Ms. Murphy's point, that is something that has to be very, very clearly articulated in any format. So, you know, at what point is tier 1, and at what point would tier 2 then become, or tier 1B, et cetera, throughout the program? At which point, what triggers that? And I think also related to the quarantine guidance that was just questioned, I would really question about what point, what absenteeism rate do you trigger having to close a school for both either staff or for students for that? And I think that would have to be a district decision about, you know, at what point is maintaining instruction no longer viable because of the quarantine.
I would echo Mr. Miller's comments about how and why we moved tiers. It's not clear to me, I know. And it's not clear to anybody, I don't think, at this point. So I would just echo that.
The tier piece is a little bit different than what you'll find on page 117. So when we created the tiers, we didn't have the guidance from the Wyoming Department of Health or the CDC in regards to what strategies should be indicated. And so as we did the update throughout the school year, those tiers were not tied to any data metrics. And actually within last year, probably fortunately so, as last year when Heather Saul and I and a couple of other individuals sat down at the initial start of the year and set some hypothetical numbers, we blew past those, absolutely destroyed those numbers in relation to what we thought percentage-wise we could still operate under. It was a percentage of attendance of around 20%. We were looking at going to tier 3. But because we didn't know what was going to happen, it was really hard to attach those numbers in that tiered system and really difficult. What we actually found through experience also was in the majority of our classrooms, elementary is a little bit different. Student attendance data is not a huge indicator of our ability to provide education to our students because of our ability to go one-to-one and provide virtual instruction. What is the biggest indicator is our staff. Once we reach a threshold of about 50% absenteeism, we found we were unable to provide enough staff in the building to provide supervision. So that's when we had to, in one situation around Thanksgiving of last year, had to go into tier 3 full virtual for Southeast High School for a limited amount of time. The tiers are more tied to what the local Department of Health and Wyoming Department of Health feel when they're looking at their metrics. And what they would suggest along with taking board action. There's 2 different types and situations that we kind of have faced. Ones that are kind of a little bit slow moving or a little bit more where we see a trajectory in relation to what tiers we're on and where board can take action based on the recommendations from the county health officials to put us in the appropriate tier. Right now, after speaking with Dr. Church yesterday, I had a good conversation with him. He does not feel any recommendations are required at this time. As we discussed each individual recommendation from the CDC and the Wyoming Department of Health, he feels strongly that we should be starting in tier 1A because of where we are at. That differs in the recommendation from the Wyoming Department of Health. On page 117, then is specifically tied to the metrics that I'm showing up here in relation to transmission. These individual items in relation to what trustees feel can either be put into a certain tier, they can either be separate to a certain tier, but as you can see in the narrative above, they are specifically with the recommendation tied to those metrics as seen above. So that kind of is the breakdown of where that occurs. Trustee Miller, there was another point of question that you may have had that I didn't address, I think. I missed something there that you may have asked.
No, I think it's just really, I think there has to be some sort of a built-in trigger to where parents can start to plan on what does this look like? You know, at what point of community transmission? Is it community transmission? Is it cases per 100,000? Is it percent positivity? I mean, there are so many different metrics. Which is the gold standard that, and this really kind of goes back to Dr. Church and the county health department and the Wyoming Department of Health around what is that metric that you would then recommend us to move tiers?
Well, and I guess along that line, if I'm understanding correctly, when you talk about the spread, you can't, I guess, again, educate me on this, the spread of COVID and Delta's a lot quicker. So our action can't be compared to what we would have done with COVID, because they're two different strains and we may have to actually take faster action if there's nothing else in place, if we don't have that target. Am I correct?
Yeah, it is, like, CDC, 56% more contagious. It takes 1 second for it to transmit to another person. So there's all different variants that are in that. Also, we're looking into flu season. So it depends on the parent and if they go to get tested. You know, there's just, what else? It'd be interesting.
Another thing I think is different too is now we have vaccines, which in the past, we haven't, so that can make a difference also with the percent of vaccinated people that we have. But right now our counties, last I knew it was like 28, 24, 5%. So if we can get higher vaccination rates, also that will help transmission, to decrease. When it's a vaccinated person with hope that it stops there. Find somebody else, but there's some other variable.
Trustee Jesperson, if I may. Yeah. One difficulty too, I think, and Trustee Miller, you and I have spoken about this, difficulty of going with the metrics is because our hesitancy for our students to be tested. As we know in some of our activity programs where packs have been made and the accuracy in the data doesn't exist in our current system. I think we can certainly say, to me, it's an extremely scary indicator right now that we're in the orange, and we know the number of people that are hesitant to be tested, along with when we start down those situations of seasons for our activities without a screening mechanism to really accurately know truly what is it look like in our community? What does spread look like? How many of our community members are infected with COVID-19 and possibly asymptomatic also? It's a very difficult thing to put in numbers, and in a perfect situation, I think you're absolutely correct. And I would love to hear if more data has been provided at the Wyoming Department of Health in relation to specific tier movement. But I know they had started that, and that was new this year, in tying screening testing and tying individual face coverings and physical distancing to the transmission indicators.
So Mr. Kramer, could you walk us through, I know we had one school last year that we had to go to tier 3. Could you walk us through that process? Say we have 50% absenteeism in the teachers, and so could you just walk us through that?
Absolutely. In that situation, we were getting to a point where our percentages were higher on the district. We had specific administrative meetings talking about, is there a threshold of students? And what we found through our experience, the interaction with an ability of our students to still take part in the education environment through virtual became an issue that we weren't having to watch as closely. But as we started progressing, when Mr. Epler gave me the call about a day before we made that decision, he said, if I have any more staff have to go in quarantine or test positive, I don't have enough subs to provide supervision for the school. So what we actually did was we took some of the staff that was in the high school that were not in quarantine or not had tested positive. In order to keep the junior high and elementary in person, we moved those staffs to those grade levels. And then we chose, because of the ability of high school students to interact in a more virtual manner and their knowledge level, that I gave then the call to trustees, letting them know that we did not have an ability to hold class. And we were going, fortunately, on break in a short period of time. So we were able to really take a look at that and say, for Monday and Tuesday of the week of Thanksgiving, we are going to have virtual education on Monday and Tuesday of that week of Thanksgiving. And then that was communicated, and there was consensus through that conversation that, yes, we understand that there just isn't a possibility of holding class face to face.
So in that instance, we were fortunate because we were coming into Thanksgiving break. What would happen, for instance, if it was not going into a vacation and it was a random Monday, or how fast can we pivot to handle that situation?
We pivoted extremely fast in that situation. It went from we had that knowledge of what it looked like because we had just received more information at about 10 a.m., 11. The administration at Southeast then held a meeting that afternoon and told them, this is what we're going to do. Please take appropriate measures. And also because we were getting information on who was quarantined. So what I do at the school year and plan to do this year is keep a spreadsheet specifically identifying when an individual enters quarantine. So I know, and then plot out exactly when they exit quarantine. So I'm able to know exactly how many staff members will be coming back on that certain day. So I knew by looking at it, when we came back from that break, we would be able to have in-person learning. And it allowed us to have that kind of separation piece. And so looking at those metrics, knowing exactly how many staff we need in order to hold courses in a way that we can do it face-to-face exactly sets up where we can come back. Because even though it may be 10 days, most likely, like in that situation, it was staggered. It was a slow process. So we had teachers that were scheduled to come back that Wednesday right before Thanksgiving. And then we had others that weren't scheduled to come back, until 5 or 6 days later. But once we reached that threshold, we were able to come back into, and that's still a little slight variable because some individuals, if they tested positive, they still have to have, even though if it's expired past the 14 days or 10 days, they still have to be fever-free and symptom-free for 24 hours before they are released from quarantine.
So I guess that leads to one more question. How much lead time could we give parents so they can make plans for their students? That presents a huge problem.
Absolutely. In that situation, it's about 24 hours. And I would say that is the minimum, but I know that in other situations, we kind of try to adapt. You figure out if you can't do it, I think that's the minimum bar. We figure out how we would then allocate staff from other buildings in the district because we need coverage. That's the same type of thing we did for custodial staff. There were numerous situations throughout the school year where we were down to maybe one custodian in a building due to quarantine. So we would have individuals that we had a full set of custodians. You're going to be at Southeast today. We would do that same type of situation for teachers or for teachers associates, or quite honestly for central staff also, that we might have to step in and provide that face-to-face coverage for a day or however long it takes. But that's the goal, is to have, especially elementary students. We were extremely fortunate, and that's a priority for us, is to have face-to-face instruction as much as possible for our elementary, because it is harder for them to navigate a virtual world. It's harder for a teacher to teach in an elementary classroom in a virtual setting as opposed to the face-to-face setting.
To your point, however, I agree with what you're saying. When you actually move a tier and move a whole school, I was given 15 minutes to come pick up my child when they quarantined the whole class. So, I mean, not 24 hours notice. It was, here's a phone call, be here in 15 minutes to pick up your kid. And so I
Excellent
think,
point. Thank you for
I
making-
think there is a difference there.
Mhm.
I guess I'd like to just second some of this. I guess my main concern too was, we got 43 pages of framework on these different tiers and the action we're going to take. We don't have one page of framework on, like everybody said, how we're going to move the tiers, who decides, who makes the final call on where we're at. I agree with Superintendent Kramer. I mean, real world, it would almost be impossible to put some sort of set matrix today on how to move the tiers. I think it changes daily with people's rates, transmission, blah, blah. So I think and second, I don't think anybody in this room could agree on what those numbers would be. I think it would just be impossible to do. I guess for me, I would like to see, since there isn't one specific framework on how to move the tiers, I'd like to see the board have to take action to move a tier. And everybody, even if we have to have an emergency meeting at 10 at night or something, that we have to vote to move the tiers. Either that or the governor moves it for us. But he gives the power to the local school district. So I think everybody should have a vote on it.
If we had to do that, would be, my concern is advertising for those sort of meetings, like if it's where we're taking action like that. I agree with your point. I just want to make sure that we're not breaking any rules by trying to do something like that.
And correct me if I'm wrong, we're kind of talking, I think there's two different situations. I would agree completely that moving anywhere but tier 3, we would have time. We would have time to advertise, we would have time. The concern I have in relation to a tier 3 move is very similar to a snow day. That is one in which myself and administration need to make a call that we're not going to be able to have school. And it would be for a limited amount of time. I would not anticipate. One item that we could do, and this is a draft and can be suggested, and I would encourage that to add anything that trustees would be comfortable with. I would say that any tier movement outside of tier 3 should go exactly through that process and hold a public meeting in relation to that and gather input from our local public health or health officials or anybody that may be remaining, but then also have the caveat that the superintendent with consensus and contact with the board in an emergency situation is still authorized to be able to inform the board, as opposed to trying to have an emergency meeting for the closure of a school the next day, just as a suggestion.
No, I mean, that's probably 1 in a million chances, but it happened at Southeast and it could happen. I mean, who knows? 15 teachers were watching the football game and 20 of them got sick and puked on Sunday and we probably have to close the school. So, yeah.
I'm just feeling like, based on the conversation that's been happening, I feel like we're ill prepared to make this decision tonight. I feel like there's a lot of inconsistencies and a lot of answers that if we were to either approve this or deny it, that I don't feel like we're really in a good place to make that decision. I think Smart Start has some good things in it that are necessary. I think the real sticking point for a lot of people is the mask mandates. And according to this optional tier system, we would be requiring face coverings right now in public settings because we're in orange. And so I don't know, I would like to see this possibly tabled and maybe have a work session over it where we could talk about this some more because I just feel like we've all voiced concerns, or many of us have voiced concerns about not understanding how tiers are moved. And I think that a huge sticking point there is mass, and maybe that includes taking mass out of it and leaving some of the other safeguards in place. But either way, I think we should consider looking at this a little bit more carefully before we move on it.
Chairman, just if I may, again, I just want to reiterate, page 117 is completely separate from the draft of the Smart Start.
Yeah,
It is
I
there,
understand.
and there's no reference to masks in the current Smart Start draft.
Right, but it said it could be included in all tiers. I'm just saying there's a lot of options here. That's what that's referring to, correct?
And that would require board members to take action currently to add that to the draft.
Right, I'm just saying there's a lot of things out there that I think can be discussed.
There's other things besides just that we need to kind of iron out before we move forward with this, is what you're saying.
Yeah,
It appears to me that I believe, myself included, we all hoped COVID was over. And we saw that, right? We saw this big dip in the summer and we've been really flat with cases. And now the media, as well as the data reported from the public health department, are showing us that clearly it's not, that we're seeing some cases come back. What does that look like in our county? I don't think we know. But I think we got a late start on this. So to Trustee Schmick's point, I believe that I think this needs a little bit more review. I do think we need to figure out what some triggers are for the district, and in consultation with public health, maybe it is Dr. Harris, the state epidemiologist, but what does that look like? I think that would be helpful. And then I think it's also important to just understand that the goal in my mind would be to keep kids in school, face-to-face instruction, if at all possible. And so what are those steps we can take to ensure that that happens? And further, not only is academic instruction our primary goal, but then many of our children, missed out on their senior year in, early 2020, when was that? 2020, or, culminating events, football games, volleyball games, tennis, whatever it might be. And so what does that look like from the Wyoming High School Sports Association? And what does quarantine look like for that?
And I do. I think it's really important to also realize that, 12 and under can't get vaccinated. If we take away the mask, the quick thing that's going to happen is that group of kids are going to end up having to isolate or quarantine. So get that right away on that page for 14 days of that. And, as a parent too, I've had two daughters who are in high school, and I do hear the voices of everybody. And I'm not going to argue with the mother's voice in the room. I'm not here for any of that. But I can also tell you from my perspective and my daughter, she said, I would rather go to school with masks than for you to take away my sports. I'd rather have, so we can look at it as different opinions, but the proof is right here and the statistics are right here. So that's what we're going off of this time. And we don't know as far as.
So what I'm hearing, I guess, is that we want to table this, come up with, if not numbers, at least some, how do I say this? Maybe not numbers, but some categories of things that we're going to look at that helps us to make those decisions as movement between tiers, whether it's staff absenteeism, all this other stuff. And would you like suggestions from board members to come to you on that?
By the way it sounds, I think it absolutely needs to be a work session,
Okay.
because there's no way that I'm going to bring numbers that are going to be, there's not going to pass with consensus. That's. I mean,
And I have a voice, sorry, Dan.
You're going right ahead.
If this was a discussion that would have been had 3 months ago, to table it, I could see it. When we're talking in a couple of weeks, we have to have something in place. And I guess when we have, you know, Dr. Church seen differently from the Wyoming Department of Health recommendations, you know, is there ever going to be that clear line? And I guess there may not be. We have to have a plan in place for our teachers and our kids. And I know that we're talking how that movement is going to happen. But I think that, you know, I don't see how abnormal circumstances can continue to have normal actions. We have to do something. And I don't think backing off of this plan, even as it is right now, as it, you know, with these changes, how we can back off of this and say we're going to table it. So I say, I think that we need to decide how we're going to actually do it, but we need to have this plan in place at the beginning of the school. A plan.
So as it stands right now, if we were to just hypothetically, if we approve this tonight, school starts in 2 weeks. And let's just say everything else is consistent, we'd be 1A, no masks, which masks are not part of this, but it would basically be schools normal.
We would be starting school as we ended the school year. That is correct.
Okay.
And everything that you said.
However, on that point, if I understand correctly, it was said that if these recommendations were from the Department of Health, and if we wanted to add them into our plan, that the amendment would have to be made, or we'd have to amend a motion to the accepting of this. So I don't know if this is the right place. However, I'd like to actually make the amendment to add these recommendations into our Smart Start plan. I don't know if this is the time or the place, but I'd like to add that.
There's been an amendment to the Smart Start plan to include all 4 of the Wyoming Department of Health recommendations into all tiers, representing what you're. Is there a second to that amendment?
I'll second it.
Okay, been moved and seconded to add the Wyoming Department of Health recommendations into the Smart Start plan at all tiers. We'll now move into discussion on that.
Well, just for clarification, before we get into that, I just noticed, well, I didn't just notice, but on page 3 in the Smart Start plan, under trainings for staff and teachers, it went from 6-foot distancing to 3-foot. That change can't be made unless these recommendations are added, correct?
And that was the correction I did make. I thought it was a transition within the school district. And it's transition within because it was about if we cannot wear a mask, if there's this other question. So that's the, it is.
I have a question for a little clarity on, I guess, more over the whole deal. Is there a date you have to be mandated to have a Smart Start plan, or are we even mandated by the state to have a Smart Start plan?
We are not mandated to have a plan to start school. As part of this, in a part as potential future funds for what is 3 different, there's ARP, there's ESSER, there's CARES. What they're looking at is a third payment. There has been the potential that board would need to take action on the mitigating strategies in a school district, and in relation to that, have that Smart Start plan posted on the website. But currently there is nothing in place there. That is just potential if Wyoming were to accept the third payment.
So to that point, and to Mr. Wagner's comments, the last 2 board meetings, how do we become proactive. I've always been taught if you fail to plan, you plan to fail, right? And so what is the plan? I think it's necessary to have a plan. Maybe it's not required. Maybe it doesn't have to have the same components, but I do think a plan is necessary. I would hate to be in your position and make these calls without some sort of a document that your 9 employers have decided to give you some guidelines on.
And one of the concerns that I have about trustee Saucedo's amendment is that we would be starting school with masking of everyone, since we're currently in the orange level of alert. And even if we drop back down to yellow, we would possibly need to require masks. So I do have a concern about that.
So I'm sorry, what would you what?
The document that it says, when Goshen County is identified based on Wyoming COVID transmission indicators in the area of dark red, orange, or yellow transmission levels. Number 1, all individuals wear face coverings in public indoor settings.
So let me ask if I can. Let's just compare this just for my simplistic way of thinking through things. 1A, where we're talking everything is kind of normal. Would it be on the Department of Health recommendations? Would that be like a yellow?
So making sure I understand your question. So you would say tier 1A would be, is in your view, yellow?
Well, because everything is kind of normal, everything, right? Am I correct?
Correct, yes, yes.
Okay. So as we move up the tiers to say 1B, 1B maybe orange. Correct?
There currently is no set because the tiers are not tied to, but they can,
Absolutely.
yep, but they can be. Yep, you're absolutely, you're spot on. You're spot on. I'm getting what you're saying now.
Okay.
You're exactly right. You could associate the transmission indicators to tiers if that would be something that the board would want to do.
Okay.
That's absolutely correct.
Okay. So if we were to adopt these recommendations and we were, I respect the fact that people are saying, okay, I don't want to be told we have to wear masks. Okay. I also have a responsibility, as that was pointed out, to be the voice for people that aren't represented here right now. And I guess my thing is there are some that do feel safer with masks. So if we were to actually go with somewhat of the Department of Health recommendations and tie it into how the SMART plan works, level 1A, again, could be yellow, level 1B would be orange. And as we progress up, we'd look at that. So if we're looking at that way, I would say that I would recommend the Department of Health, or amend and make a motion to accept the Department of Health recommendations with the understanding that where it states all individual wear face cover, actually, it would be starting at orange.
But who's gonna say we're in orange?
They do.
We're there. We're there
I
today.
You wearing masks right now?
Yeah, we're there
If
today.
we drop to yellow,
Tomorrow.
if we drop to yellow, then we could go without masks, right? But if the numbers would show that we'd be dropping in.
So that would have to come down
In the
to
cases.
your guys' instructor. I will tell you, we follow the CDC and the state health
Correct.
order. So yeah, we'd still recommend to wear a mask, whether the transmission is a little less.
Gotcha. At yellow, even, correct? That's interesting.
Yes.
Trustee Sisseto, any trustee then, like I had referenced, this is a draft. If the trustees felt that they would like to eliminate, just as, like I think you were referencing, just for clarification, that if trustees wanted to eliminate yellow from those, and then that only be in place for orange, red, and dark red, that is completely up to the trustees. These are recommendations, not requirements, and so you can piecemeal pick whatever part that you can support and put within the plan. You can also say this is only within tier 2 that we're going to implement these practices, and then the board would then dictate what tier we are in those practices. So just for clarification.
Mr. Kramer, correct me if I'm wrong, but once we get to 1B, we basically, all these are in place already anyway, am I correct?
I don't, and I could be wrong, in 1B,
Face masks.
I don't believe face coverings are included in that. If anybody can see where that.
Yeah, always
They are.
face coverings
Okay,
must be
so then
worn.
never mind. And that is correct. You are correct.
In process, in at least it's required in, yes, 6 feet of distancing or wear face coverings in classrooms, and they're required in passing in common areas.
6 feet of face coverings are used as guards.
So what would be new would be testing. Screen. And 3 feet. Instead of 6.
So is this-
I'll be frank real quick. Bottom line, I mean, I think we could spend months, weeks in meetings going over what every one of us wanted on this. I'll be real, the instant we mandate face coverings without shutting down the schools, it'll be total chaos, so. Teachers won't want to teach, students won't want to come to school, parents will be calling every 2 seconds. Just the way it's gonna be. We gotta keep that in the back of our minds too.
I think,
Or we're just gonna have a round 2 of what we did last spring.
I think maybe that it was lost in my rambling earlier, but that was part of what I was trying to say. A lot of people, especially that are here tonight, are caught up on the mess, and fair enough, but there is other good stuff in here. I think we could consider pulling the face covering piece of it. Maybe until we can put a level on it, red, dark red, but you know, at that point we'll probably be pulled out of school anyway. So I don't know, that's just my 2 cents.
So are we to the point of voting on Mr. Salcedo's amendment, or where are we at?
Well, can I ask, where will we start this year?
So, the way I understand it, and it seems like you made an amendment to your amendment, was to add these transmission indicators, like the colors, to tiers. Like if we were in orange, then we're going to be in 1B. Did I understand? Is that what I was understanding?
Well, I was asking for clarification to see if there was some, correlation to that. However, I mean, it was clarified for me. However, I guess it wasn't necessarily part of my amendment.
Okay. So the way we had the amendment worded then was to add the Wyoming Department of Health recommendations to all tiers. And you, all 4 of these recommendations to all tiers. So that's what we're discussing right now.
So it's number 4, just for my curiosity, diagnostic rapid COVID testing can be provided at all facilities. A, they're not fun to collect. B, I wouldn't want to do it on a student. C, liberating out here, who's going to do this? I think that is a question, although it would be nice to have, right? Your kid goes into the office, you want to know before they're sent home because they have 102-degree fever. And the parent consents to that before they leave, so they know, potentially. But the questions still remain for me is how do you operationalize that? And then also meet the reporting requirements, because then the results of said tests need to be reported to the state.
There is a new, but there's a test that may be able to be provided through the state test, and it actually is a PCR rapid test. I'm not sure how rapid, each test takes an hour, but it's a shallow nasal swab, and it does not have to be done by a healthcare professional. So those tests, are immediate, like I said, it's not necessarily within 5 minutes, but it is a rapid test. And then I know that they're working on a system to get those reported to the state if they are positive. So those could be used for symptomatic or asymptomatic, so even for surveillance, or it sounds like that.
Does it aerosolize like the other rapid tests do? So therefore potentially infecting those people who are taking the test if it's not under a negative pressure hood?
Well, it looked like, and I haven't studied it completely, I just brought that up, that we may be able to get those.
Okay.
But it looked like it's just a little swab in the shallow there, so you don't have to go deep like some of the PCR tests that are so fun. And it's just got a little cartridge that it's like testing. So I haven't used it, but it looks like it's maybe something that we could think about if you're interested in checking into that.
And that is what Dr. Harris was referencing in her recommendation to the superintendent, the discussion that we had in relation to rapid testing be available and provided by school nurse, and it is not it is the shallow nasal cavity. That's the best way to describe it. So.
I would call a question on the amendment.
Okay, question has been called on the amendment of adding the Wyoming Department of Health recommendations, all 4 Wyoming Department of Health recommendations to all tiers. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. All those opposed?
Same sign.
Same sign.
Aye.
Aye.
Any abstentions? Motion or the amendment fails. We're back to the original motion of approving the Smart Start plan as presented.
I guess I just kind of feel like whatever we decide to do here, we don't need to take it out of our hands. I understand like the circumstance that Mr. Kramer was talking about, or if you gotta cancel the school, he's gonna have to make that call and do it. I don't think there's a person on this board that's got a problem with that. But as far as letting somebody else dictate what's gonna happen in our schools, I have a problem with that. I mean, I think that needs, we can use the experts and use their opinions, and it can all be brought before us, but I don't feel like that should be taken out of our hands by any metrics or anything like that. So as far as I'm concerned, if we're gonna use a Smart Start plan, this board needs to vote on when we move each tier. And I understand the circumstances like what he was talking about, where you can't have that meeting to do that. And I don't think anybody has a problem with that.
So what and I'm going back to what he said about, on some of these things, the indicators are, we would be able to advertise for a meeting, to be able to take that sort of action to move between some of these tiers. with the exception of there being, if we had to do like we did with Southeast last year for Thanksgiving, where we have to make that call quickly, we're gonna leave that up to Mr. Kramer and the administrators based on absenteeism, kind of like we did last year. Okay. So that's
I
kind of
would, I would probably do exactly what we did with trustee Salcedo, offer a amendment to the current draft and then have that seconded. So in relation to wording that would say exactly what you stated, be added to the draft of the Smart Start plan. And then that can be added into the draft with a vote taken as we just had with the questioning of the addition of the other 4 items.
okay. So I'm gonna kind of piggyback off of Mr. Cushman here. So Mr. Cushman is offering an amendment to the Smart Start plan to include, if we have to move between tiers 1 and 2, we would require a board meeting. Because
Well, I'm saying,
go ahead.
sorry, I don't want to cut you off.
No,
I'm
no,
saying
I don't
like
want to
it-
put words in your mouth.
I don't want to say, I'm saying any tier, whether it's 1A to 1B or anything, not just 1 to 3. Because, right, I mean, 1A to 1B is a tier, correct? I'm saying any tier, not just 1, 2, or 3.
So who are you saying has that authority? Who would you, what's your suggestion for who has that authority then?
I say we make a vote at the school board as the board. If we want to bring in,
Between all the
yeah,
tiers? Okay, so my mistake was saying that tier 3 could be just decided by,
well, I don't know how to say it, I guess, because I mean, if there is an emergency, there's no way we're gonna have the meeting. And I understand that, but I don't know how you put that in there. What do you qualify as an emergency? I mean, I guess that's the tough part
we
about
get
it.
back into
Yeah, then-
that discussion about what data metrics are we
Yeah.
talking about.
But I mean, like last year, Mr. Kramer, I mean, he did send out emails, I think, to all of us outlining, the situation really quick. And so I think he did his best to try to communicate before they made the decision, but it did have to be made pretty quick.
Can I make a suggestion? I guess it's not an amendment, but a suggestion. In order to move this forward, I think either one of 2 things we could easily move forward with tonight. One is to defeat the motion and start without a Smart Start program. 2, I think there's a lot in here that is valuable. I think we could remove face coverings from the entirety of the plan. And if we were to consider face coverings, that would take an additional motion of the board. That would allow us to then call that emergency meeting, but it would also allow the superintendent to have the latitude to move between these tiers aside from face coverings and allow us to allow him to make what the safety decisions for our kids aside from going to a mask mandate. I can reword that into a motion if you would like, but I think that I don't think otherwise we'll come to consensus this evening.
So I think that sounds like an amendment.
So you want me to word that?
Yeah.
All right, so I would move to amend the Smart Start program to remove face coverings from all levels. And that to remove face coverings from all levels, that's what it would be. And we vote on the original motion would be to approve.
So there's been an amendment to remove face coverings from all tiers of the Smart Start plan. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Schmick. We're now moving to discussion on that. I think one thing I'll say about face coverings, and again, I go back to, and we talked about it a lot last year, obviously, and Mr. Wagner brought it up again, the Wyoming Constitution and how health is an individual's choice. So just because we remove face coverings from our Smart Start plan does not prevent people from making the decision, their own individual decision, to wear a mask if they want. It also doesn't prevent people from making their own individual decision about getting vaccinated. One thing that I really appreciated about last year when the variance was passed or was approved, I basically pled with our students and our community to respect each other's choices, because that's what the Constitution says we're allowed to do. So in this instance, I'm still making that plea that everybody make your own decision and respect the decisions of everybody else. We don't need to have any additional reasons for kids to pick on kids in our schools, because it's hard enough as it is. And I'll put my soapbox.
So just to get understanding, then this would give Mr. Kramer the ability to move between tiers as he sees fit.
So this would just remove, so what's on the table currently is to remove face coverings from the plan. At that point, we can have further discussion, but in my opinion, it would then, I don't see anything that's really controversial. It talks mostly about separation and cleaning procedures, et cetera, et cetera.
I would agree with that to a point. I think we were getting into the red and the dark red, removing face masks from those two situations, I think is a dangerous game. I just do not understand. The very simplest thing that we can do to make a difference is put on a face mask. And we're not willing to do that. We're not willing to look at that. And that bothers me. The other tiers, but I think that's we're getting into like tier 3, is that the last one?
Tier 3 would be online only.
School, yeah, and okay, then the one before that. Then if we're not taking a look at face coverings as part of keeping kids in school,
I fully,
ourselves in that.
I think as everybody out here would attest, I would fully agree with you. However, I also believe that we would need to meet as a board before that decision was made. Whereas moving to online school, partial closures of schools, Mr. Kramer needs to have that ability. And then we can have the mask debate again if needed.
Why would we do that,
separately.
though? That's what I don't understand. Why would we do that? If I'm not understanding, and somebody help me understand this, why would we take away from a plan that has been effective? And going with the premise, when you know better, you do better. Why would we take away from that plan instead of building it up? Help me understand that point. Someone.
Because the plan's never been proven. It's everybody's opinion.
Okay, but right now, I guess, and again, I'm not just talking about within our walls. Has it shown that masks are somewhat effective to either COVID or Delta 9? But I'm going with, somebody help me understand why we would take away from a plan. Why, if that's the case, then yeah, let's scrap all of it. Why, I guess my feeling is we don't want to address the mask right now because that's the issue. We're not looking at it as a whole of how we're going to actually take care of our kids and take care of our staff and take care of our families. We're wanting to not deal with this issue because we don't want to deal with it again as we did the last couple of times. And my feeling is as community leaders, we need to take a stance and we need to actually say, take that lead, because obviously some others are not actually coming down with a decision saying, okay, I'm going to leave it to you all to do it. Okay, well then let's do it. Let's not push it off to next month or in 2 months. Let's take care of it.
I think my issue is we are adding a lot of bureaucratic steps to the Smart Start program because the mask mandate was tripping everybody up. I think giving Mr. Kramer the ability to move between tiers as he sees fit, it has a lot of value to it. And I think the only sticking point was people and the mask mandate. And And I would agree, I voted for the mask variance last time. I would like to see the Smart Start plan stay in place. I don't mind having the tough conversation down the road if we get to red or dark red, that we need to have the mask come back. I don't mind having that conversation at that point in time. But I would rather see the Smart Start program in place and leave out the masks. Have that be a separate conversation.
I just, not to micromanage this. I think it's unfair for Mr. Kramer to put it all on his shoulders. I really do. I mean, as a board, we need to take stance and not leave it on his shoulders.
So I guess it seems like we've gotten into a different issue where the movement between the tiers is kind of been discussed as leaving that up to Mr. Kramer, where we're discussing right now the mask being in the tiers. So I think those are two separate issues. So if we can go back to talking about the amendment, which was to remove the mask or face coverings from the tiers, then we can, after we move past that, then we can discuss movement between tiers.
So if we vote on this right now, all we're voting on is pulling the mask from the tiers, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Any more discussion?
My only comment would be is I made the motion, right? And really what I'm seeking to do is try to create some consensus, to create some guidelines to get us back to school. My personal belief and my belief as a community leader, as well as healthcare, is that we should be wearing masks. I believe that strongly. What I'm trying to do is move us forward into a position to where we may have to very well have that hard conversation, Trustee Saucedo, and I agree that at some point, to Trustee Hager's comment about you put masks on kids and we're going to have an uprising. I think my gut tells me the moment that we have to quarantine an entire elementary school, we're going to have equal uprising. And so at that point, I think we're going to have to just come back to the table and discuss this. To your points earlier, I think we are kicking the can down the road and having to make a decision later. But I don't know that tonight it is the point to make that decision. So that's why I made the motion.
I can live with that as long as the can is there to kick down the road.
It sounds
But
like
taking
it's
the
gonna be.
can off completely, can't live with that.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the amendment to remove face coverings from all tiers of the Smart Start plan, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Any abstentions? Motion passes. We're now back to the original motion of approving the Smart Start plan with the amendment that was passed. Or if there's, and we can also have any other changes in there too, if you'd like. Okay. All right, so thank you, Mr. Kramer. So is it the intent of the board then tonight that Mr. Kramer be given the authority to move between tiers as he seems necessary.
I got one just kind of off the wall. God forbid something like this ever happened, but what if Mr. Kramer was incapable? What if he got sick, he got hurt, got in a car wreck? What would our next move be if we put it all?
Right now, I would probably say, in conjunction with the administration and chairman of the board, would make a determination in that type of situation, just because I think they need to keep the administrative piece. In other situations, I would probably say the one most familiar would be the director of curriculum. But at that time, being that we have a recent hire in that position of Mr. Fuller and still learning the system within Goshen County, I would not want to put anyone in that situation who is just brand new to their position and having knowledge of that. So that would be my recommendation.
I mean, it's not a huge deal, but I guess I would still like to see some sort of wording on if we're moving from 1A to anywhere except 3, that it would take what the board's vote.
I think that would take a lot of the weight off of Mr. Kramer's shoulders. I mean, honestly, we're asking him to decide all this stuff, but I mean, a move from 1 to 3, yeah, okay, it's emergency situation, I get it, but asking him to make the decision based on we don't even know what at this point between tiers, I think that's too much. I think 1 to 3 in an emergency situation, yes. Otherwise, I think it needs to be board approval.
In which case, then we would call an emergency meeting, but we'd have to advertise it the required amount of days. Ms. Fritzler.
Emergency meetings, you can call it anytime, we're just required to notify.
And we can take action in those meetings. Okay, all right. Well, that clears up that issue. I was
Any
worried
action
about that.
taken in an emergency meeting, doesn't it have to, at the next regular meeting, be, the action actually has to be taken at the next regular meeting?
And the rush clause then, apparently. My apologies. Okay, so with that, Mr. Hager, are you offering amendment to include that being a board decision other than from 1 to 3 or moving into tier 3?
Yeah.
Okay. So there has been a motion to amend the Smart Start plan to movement between tiers, with the exception of movement into tier 3, requires board action. Is there a second? Second. Thank you, Mr. Schmick. Okay, we can go into discussion on that. I think we just had some.
Now, does this, now this includes what, his amendment, right?
Right. We are. Yes. So Smart, as it stands right now, without face coverings.
No face coverings, and we vote every tier.
Yep.
Except for 1 to 3.
Yep.
And that would include from 1A to 1B.
Right. And I would also offer that in those meetings, we can also discuss, that would be a time where we could discuss face coverings again, as being an option to kind of help combat the tier chain and tiers or transmission indicators. Any further discussion? Yes.
Okay, we have the original first motion on the floor still
Yes.
to revise this part of the plan. It's Carrie and Zach. Done amendments. Just pass the motion to amend.
Correct.
So now we have Dylan's motion to amend the Smart Start plan. That any movement between tiers and levels except tier 3 requires board action. That's where we're at.
That's where we're at.
We
Not
did.
making another. Taylor seconded that. Or we amended something else. Or
No.
we finished that one.
We're going to finish that one.
We did have one.
Sounded like another one.
Oh, did I?
We had one motion from trustee Saucedo to include the recommendations from the Wyoming Department of Health and CDC and trustee Bullington seconded, and that was defeated.
Right.
Yeah, I didn't know, I missed that one, sorry.
That was one fork, and now we're on a fork with.
We didn't know that we were in a Senate session. So here we are.
I'm glad we've had lots of motions with amendments in prior meetings, so I can get used to this piece of. Okay. So. Any discussion on the amendment for adding board action into the Smart Start plan?
The goal of this is to, what's the goal?
To take some of the pressure off of Mr. Kramer into making decisions as to movement between tiers. It becomes our responsibility to make that decision based on if these transmission indicators change, or we have things happen within the school that Mr. Kramer feels requires that discussion.
Mr. Kramer is going to be actually getting the data from the Department of Health, and I mean, you're going to be taking you're going to be basing your decision on what the Department of Health actually recommends and CDC recommends.
Well, moving from tier 1 to tier 3 actually wouldn't have any correlation to the transmission. It would have a correlation to our ability to provide face-to-face education.
Right. But other than that, you would be taking the data to move between tiers.
I say that right. I mean, it seemed to me at least that the intent was to when you're gonna, I mean, Mr. Kramer is gonna use that information to tell us, look, we need to talk about this. And that's when we would have to hold an emergency meeting to have that discussion and take any action if we needed to take any, or if we felt like we needed to take some. Okay.
Can I just ask one question? And it's really to Mr. Kramer. Do you prefer the board take action on, because the discussion was had that the rationale here is it's a heavy lift on your shoulders. Do you prefer that the board is involved? Okay.
You just can't get sick or hurt. Because then when I heard that all of a sudden becomes my responsibility.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
Sorry, I shouldn't cheer. Just trying to add some. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the amendment to the Smart Start plan to include that in movement between tiers, with the exception of movement into tier 3, requires board action. Is that? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Aye.
Any abstentions? The motion passes. So now we are back to the original motion to approve the Smart Start plan as amended. I think that's the way to do that, right? Okay. Any further discussion on that motion? Okay, hearing that, all those in favor of approval of the Smart Start plan as discussed tonight, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? The motion passes.
Back to reading. We take a 5-minute recess.
We will recess for 5 minutes.
All right, under new business, item B, consider a request to rescind a teacher resignation. The recommendation is to approve the request from LaDonna Sittner to rescind her resignation as a Torrington Middle School teacher at the end of 2020-2021 school year.
Can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Patrick. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Sussex. Any discussion? I was personally glad to see this, happy to see that she wants to continue helping us out. I thought she was a phenomenal teacher, so
I agree. Thank you.
any other discussion? All those in favor of approving the request from LaDonna Sittner to rescind her resignation as a Torrington Middle School teacher at the end of the 2020-2021 school year, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes.
Item C, under new business, it's recommended to approve offering a teaching contract to LaDonna Sittner as an academic interventionist for math at Torrington Middle School for the 2021-2022 school year only. To Cheyenne Broadway as a behavior interventionist at Torrington Middle School for the 2021-2022 school year only. And to Patricia Bamer as a behavior interventionist at Torrington High School for the 2021-2022 school year only.
Can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Schmidt. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Patrick. Any discussion? Mr. Saucedo, you look like you were going to say something, or you had that look on your face, like, or did I just read that?
Well, no, you did. I wasn't that position at Torrington Middle School for the behavior interventionist filled at one point? Did we not have someone else?
The social worker position maybe is, but I don't believe, not for the behavior interventionist. We have not previously filled that position at TMS.
Okay, that's where I thought
that's a good question. Okay. Any other discussion? All those in favor of approval of offering a teaching contract to LaDonna Sittner as an academic interventionist for math at Torrington Middle School, to Cheyenne Broadway as a behavior interventionist at Torrington Middle School, and to Patricia Bamer as a behavior interventionist at Torrington High School for the 2021-2022 school year, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes.
Item D, under new business, it's recommended to approve contracting with Long's Mechanical Solutions for HVAC building management system replacements at TMS, Lincoln, Trail, Southeast, Lingle, and LaGrange in the total amount of $47,260 funded through major maintenance.
Can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Saucedo. Is there a second? Thank you, Mr. Hager. Any discussion? All those in favor of approval of contracting with Long Mechanical Solutions for HVAC building management system replacements at TMS, Lincoln, Trail, Southeast, Lingle, and LaGrange in the total amount of $47,260 funded through major maintenance, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes.
Item E, it's recommended to approve the purchase of 72 screen beam wireless video transmitters and 8 new line interactive boards from Troxel Communications in the total amount of $34,456 funded through CARES.
Can I have a motion, please?
Move to approve.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Schmick. Any discussion? So how many of the, Mr. Brian Foster, Mr. Foster. I'm sorry. So as far as like these interactive boards, we're getting a fair number of these, aren't we?
Yes, at this time, we have almost every classroom that instruction has a board. Teacher connects that board without having to be wired.
Okay. And so the first part of that, then the wireless video transmitter, is that just cameras for?
It's a device that connects to the board.
Oh,
Your
okay.
computer will attach to that.
Like a projector, more or less.
It's just a little wireless box, like a Bluetooth receiver, that your computer connects to that, and I can project like the screen here tonight.
Okay, so like you were just saying that you can connect to the display wirelessly.
Correct.
That's what allows that.
Yeah, that's the number that is there is the total number of boards that we purchased through the CARES funds over the last year and a half.
Okay. Thank you. Any other discussion? All those in favor of approval of the purchase of 72 screen beam wireless video transmitters and 8 new line interactive boards from Troxel Communications in the total amount of $34,456 funded through CARES, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? The motion passes.
Item F, discuss and consider IRS guidelines for meal provided at annual back to school in service. I will just make a motion to approve, just so we can have the discussion. I'll make a motion to approve, formally recognizing an exemption to the district to provide a meal following the annual back to service in service on Tuesday, August 17th, 2021.
Thank you, Mr. Miller, Mr. Saucedo. Any discussion? Before I chime in, I'll ask Ms. Cates. Well, a little background, I guess. There was some TAM, some sort of action memo from the IRS where meals, in order to be deductible to the employer, would have to be taxable to the employee. So in other words, the value of that meal would be included in your W-2 as taxable wages. In that memo that offers, and Mr. Kramer in this case asked me to look at this memo, considering my background, something I'm supposed to know some stuff about. There are a number of exceptions or things that would allow you to not do that, basically. And in the memo it's just in the packet. So in your board packet, there is that memo from Ms. Cates. She summarizes basically what kind of the discussion I had via email with them, why I think we would qualify for one of those exemptions. Basically, because we don't provide meals to our staff on a regular basis, and that value of this meal in particular, as Mr. Kramer stated, the amount in prior years has been close to 2,500. You divide that amongst all the staff that would be there and their families, that amount gets pretty minimal. So that's why I think we don't even, personally, that's why basically I'm saying we don't need to worry about it, about that aspect of the benefits being included in the wages. Did we ask MHP about that, our auditors?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, members of the board, our auditors, Nikki and Pies, were asked for a recommendation, and at the time of the board packet going out, they had not yet responded. They did respond with the same comments that Chairman Jesperson had, the fact that it was very immaterial, and they felt like a one-time exception was very fitting. I think it's important that it be treated as a one-time exception, just because of the fact that, you know, we used to provide meals for parent-teacher conferences and all sorts of meetings and that type of thing, and that practice would still continue. But this being a one-time event once a year, where all staff and families be invited, and I'm looking at it being $5 or less when you figure what the cost might be.
I'm glad that they had the same assessment. That means I can keep my license. And I'll add just a little more to that, just to show off how much I know apparently. I really think that that memo was aimed at employers that provide meals on a constant basis to their employees. I've been to facilities where that's the case. And I don't think that that's what we're doing here. So. Any other discussion on that? All those in. How did you?
Approving, so it's
Approving the exception.
to approve offering a meal for the district on the date stated.
All right, all those in favor of offering a meal to the district for the in-service on Tuesday, August 17th, 2021, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? I will abstain since I will be benefiting from that. Please signify, or
Just one reminder, Mr. Chairman, that board members are expected to come and serve at that event.
I wondered with the new COVID issues, if that would still be recommended.
Are we doing
Because
a
we don't
box
have
meal?
splatter guards or anything like that at the tables.
Currently, that all allows for in our safe smart start that we can have visitors, we can have all of those things. So trustees are certainly welcome if they feel comfortable.
the motion passes. And we can talk about that in your report a little more.
It's next future meetings.
Item G, consider approval of a proposed revisions to district policy 6141.41 curriculum development as presented on introduction and first reading.
Can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Patrick. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Bullington. Any discussion? All those in favor of approval of the proposed revisions to district policy 6141.41 curriculum development as presented on introduction and first reading, please signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes.
Item H, consider approval of proposed revisions to district policy 4117 certified personnel evaluation system as presented on introduction and first reading.
Can I have a motion, please?
So move.
Thank you, Mr. Sussex. Any, is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Patrick. Any discussion? All those in favor of approval of the proposed revisions to district policy 4117 certified personnel evaluation system as presented on introduction and first reading, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes.
Item I is a discussion of district policy 5113 student attendance. There is no recommendation.
For clarity, I'll just, so we get into discussion, I'll move that we
I can make a motion.
Okay.
I would move that we suspend the attendance policy for the school year 2021, 2022.
Is there a second?
Second.
Now we can move into discussion.
One of the, Chairman, just for if I may, one of the key components there in attendance, I would wholeheartedly agree with many of the steps and having and suspending those items. up until we have the outcomes at the very end in regards to a determination to be moved forward to the county attorney. There were situations last year where attendance was a significant factor, and they were not COVID related. And in those situations, having the ability to discuss options and work cooperatively with the county attorney to get everybody at the table, because there does seem to be a little bit more attention given when the county attorney and other individuals besides the school are involved in regards to some situations of truancy. The other situations really are about that meeting, that face-to-face, but those still, and that communication is important, but I don't necessarily feel that the majority of our students need to have meetings on the third, a fifth absence and those types of things. We're talking about significant, and when we talk about with the county attorney in regards to when those conversations take place, a multitude of evidence and discussion has taken place between parents and school before that's moving forward. So I agree with the ability to suspend the other consequences, but would leave then an ability either through other wording that I can suggest, or a caveat with the attendance when the school administration and superintendent agree to put forward a recommendation to the county attorney, they may do so.
So that would require an amendment to the motion.
So I would amend my motion to include suspending the attendance policy for the 2021-2022 school year, accepting the situation in which school administration recommends involvement of county attorney due to excessive truancy or absenteeism.
Okay, is there a second to that amendment?
I'll second that.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Bullington.
It's recorded.
So again, if I'm understanding, it's only for this school year. And I'm going to take it that it's only for the school year because we're taking into consideration COVID and
So I do feel in the future, this would be another policy committee discussion there are components, well, to even backtrack. The state of Wyoming needs to relook at their truancy laws, and that is currently under discussion. So I think there will be changes at the state level that require us to take some action. I also think even if we do not see movement at the state level, I think before we start the 22-23 school year, I think there are some components in there that need to be revisited, and what is an effective tool and what is not necessarily an effective tool for attendance reasons outside of COVID. And hopefully, we will be back into a situation where we can do that and say, you bet, we want a quality attendance policy in there that's not related to COVID-19 attendance variances that could happen because of quarantine situations or illness.
so with that recommendation, would we be noted? I mean,
Any other discussion? Okay, all those in favor of approval of suspension of the attendance policy for the 2021-2020 school year, with the exception of when the superintendent and administration feel, let me say this from the involvement of the county attorney in cases of excessive absenteeism or truancy. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? The motion passes.
New business item J, consider approval of revised contract amount with IMSE. The recommendation is to approve revision of the IMSE contract for the 2021-2022 school year and additional amount of $34,300. The original contract was approved in June, funded through Title 1A and 6B.
Can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Schmick. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Any discussion? All those in favor of approval of the revision to the IMSE contract for the 2021-2022 school year in the additional amount of $34,300. The original contract was approved in June, will be funded through Title 1A and 6B. Please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes.
Okay, sorry, I have to read this for me. Item K under new business, consider approval of contracting with Solution Tree for district staff professional development. The recommendation is to approve contracting with Solution Tree for problem-solving process professional development, including virtual coaching and 2 days of on-site staff training in the total amount of $85,000.
Can I have a motion, please? So moved. Thank you, Mr. Schmick, or Mr. Sussex. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Schmick. Any discussion?
So it says that, again, we're going to be paying 68,000 incrementally after each date. And how many dates are those, have those been identified? And how many are there?
If you look at exhibit A, it identifies September 7th and October 12th as on-site dates. And then there's 32-hour sections. Very page 3 and 5.
Gotcha.
Very back page.
Should have kept turning the pages. Thank you.
Any other discussion? All those in favor of approval of contracting with Solution Tree for problem-solving process, professional development, including virtual coaching and 2 days of on-site staff training in the total amount of $85,000 funded through 6B, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes. Okay. Future meetings, next regular board meeting will be Tuesday, September 14th, 2021 at 7 p.m. The annual back to school staff in service will be Tuesday, August 17th, 2021 at 8 a.m. in the THS auditorium. That includes the meal that we were talking about to start at noon. And trustees are invited to come and, are we doing this a regular like service or is it a box meals? Do we know yet?
In talking to Patty, she is not able to do the pork sandwiches that she's done in the past, but she's looking at a true barbecue hamburgers, and it would be service to the one.
Okay. So if trustees are comfortable and want to help serve at that, you're welcome to be at TMS probably a little before noon to get set up. Okay. Move on to the superintendent's report.
This kind of goes along with future meetings, but just all trustees are invited to the back to school night for the district on Old Wiseman Field, and that's Monday, August 23rd from 5:30 to 7:30. Food is provided by Banner Health, and music is going to be provided by Mountain Event Services. And I know the National Guard is bringing some fun activities also to participate with kids. And so it's kind of a community back to school evening that we planned for the celebration of getting back into school next day.
And you said what time is it?
5:30 to 7:30. And I can provide us with some updates on enrollment numbers. Those are constantly changing as we've had the registration this week. Various percentages. I know Southeast was posting percentages of students that they've had that have registered for each of their grade levels, varying from 70% down to 40% of the students that they had rostered. Right now it's a little too early to tell where we will be at on those projections. I know I do have a number of meetings on Thursday scheduled with individual parents regarding individuals who wish to attend school outside of their attendance area. I think what I would expect is an increase in enrollment from last year. As to what that number might go to match the previous year is still yet to be determined. Then update on staff transfers. And we still have some positions that we are waiting to fill. The challenge has been really revolving door isn't the right way, but there's been a lot of movement from staff members to different jobs as they've transferred. And so we've had an opening in one building and then a transfer has been made and then that opening is then posted. And so we still have a special education teacher at Torrington High School, a first grade teacher at Lincoln Elementary, a social worker district position. This is a CARES funded, so this is a new position. And then 2 additional CARES positions at Torrington High School yet to be filled. The academic interventionist and the 3 assigned academic interventionist. The 2 big ones on that list are special education at Torrington High School and Lincoln Elementary first grade teacher. I do know for both of those positions, they are having interviews this week and will certainly be offering a position by the end of the week is my hopes. We still do have a number of classified positions, again, just from various movements that have been occurring, but we're getting into a lower number, I think, than what we've been at previously, because we did open up those non-certified positions a little bit earlier than we've had in the past, where we kind of did it a little bit later. That was kind of advantageous. I know it was a struggle for many of our administrators as they've had to conduct some interviews earlier in the year, but with the background checks, I think we will probably have I'm guessing, but Maureen can correct me if I'm wrong, a higher percentage of non-certified staff being filled because we're not waiting for background checks, because we started that process a little bit earlier, because that has been one of the indications from previous years that have held us back in being able to have individuals who we've hired start day 1. So I think that has helped also. And the last one it's not on the agenda, but the mental health wellness committee. I have had 5 individuals contact me with interest in serving on that, kind of in combination from asking and contacting me, and then 3 others that I've reached out to. So if anybody would be interested still in serving on that committee, I am certainly willing to hear that. We want to get started next week in reaching out and setting a time for our first meeting and setting some of those things that we talked about in our last meeting to address some of the mental health needs in our community and in our school in particular.
Thank you for mentioning that. I was going to ask. Okay. That's everything that I have. Okay, with that being the last item.